How you doing?
Good. How are you?
All right.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the CASAA update for the week of 10/5/2015. So, has anything interesting happened recently?
Um, it's slow, so it's hard to come up with good stuff to chat about. But I did. These are not new bills that I wanted to talk about. There's two bills in at the federal level. The one we this might actually be different, but there was a bill introduced earlier this year that I guess it had the same name, the Child Nicotine Poisoning Prevention Act of 2015.
Right.
And the way that was written was simply, I believe, what's the name of the commission? The Consumer
Product
Protect,
Safety Commission?
yeah, something like that. It would compel them to basically come up with a rule that would require all uh, nicotine containing liquid to be sold in child resistant packaging. This is a little bit more wordy than that and basically just goes straight to um, essentially all e-liquid bottles would have to conform to the Poison Prevention Packaging Act of
Okay.
1970. Um, so this is a pretty straightforward bill, something that we've supported. Uh, you know, it's kind of a no-brainer that these products should come in child-resistant packaging, and that's kind of the way the industry is going anyway.
Right.
Um, but I did see a pretty interesting definition of nicotine, and it's on the last page, right at the bottom. And the term nicotine means any form of the chemical nicotine, including any salt or complex, regardless of whether the chemical is naturally or synthetically derived. And the reason I sort of perk up about this is that, uh, we've, because of the way the Tobacco Control Act was written,
Mm-hmm.
the FDA has been very clear about saying it, made or derived from tobacco.
Right.
Um, but I feel like I've seen this definition pop up in state legislatures,
Right.
perhaps at the local level as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just something to, I think everybody should be paying attention to going forward. Um, I have heard people talk about there being actually a cost effective synthetic nicotine product out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and these are coming from reliable people. This is not the kind of the myth, the mythological. It comes from eggplants kind of talk. This is
Right.
actually, real. Somebody managed to do this and will likely be able to bring it to market in a cost-effective way.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it's not happening tomorrow or anything, but I'm sure whoever actually has the formula is going to be pretty tight-lipped about it because um, obviously, if they're the only ones doing it, it means a lot of money for them.
Right.
Um, so anyway, just going forward, uh, I think keeping an eye on how nicotine is treated in some of these bills is pretty important. But for
Mm-hmm.
those keeping score, this bill is HB 3242. It's just been introduced. Nothing substantial has happened to it. I guess
Right.
yeah. This went through a markup session is what happened. That all
Okay.
happened. I guess on the 30th, so middle of last week.
Okay.
Um, the other bill is appropriately SB 2100.
Okay.
Um, this would raise the smoking age, actually, the sale of any tobacco product to 21.
Yeah, I saw that.
And of course, it's riddled with all kinds of large, scary numbers and lots of weird facts and so on. And
Mm-hmm.
I tend to not bring this up, and CASAA has been somewhat um, quiet on this.
Right.
I think we haven't really taken an official position,
Mm-hmm.
um, but uh, because this does get into the whole, I don't know why. There's some political considerations here, and it's one of those things. But I gotta say, first of all, lumping smoke-free products in with a bill like this is completely uninformed, and moreover, it just you know, it, if I'm 18 years old, I can vote, I can die for my country, and I can make all kinds of other bad decisions that will
Mm-hmm.
potentially end my life.
Right. But you can't drink or smoke.
Why the hell can't I have a cigarette? It just, it kind of blows me away. And,
Well, yeah.
I think they're projecting some large numbers here. Like, you know, I think I kind of understand the whole brain development thing. Like once you reach a certain age, you're less impressionable, and you're less likely to develop a smoking addiction, or a dependency on certain chemicals or whatever. Um, I don't know how much truth there is to all of that. It seems rational, but I'm not the science guy, so that's more Carl's wheelhouse. And Carl has in fact blogged about this. Moving the age up. It doesn't necessarily mean that. I think the analogy he used was like football or something. Like um, it's not a good comparison. Someone who is 21 isn't going to start playing football necessarily. I can't remember exactly how it worked, but it had to deal with cohorts, and just because you move the goalposts a little bit, it doesn't necessarily mean that those people aren't going to initiate or whatever.
Right.
Um, so
Well, I think legislation like this breeds disrespect for the law. Do you know
yeah,
what I mean? So many things have been made illegal or will be made illegal that how can you take it seriously? There will always be someone willing to get an 18-year-old cigarettes or a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old. Lots of times it's their own freaking parents. So, despite what you may think about it, I don't think this is something the government should be concerning itself with. The bond market is crashing and the dollar is highly devalued. We have Obamacare exchanges being shuttered all across the country. It seems to me the government has bigger fish to fry than raising the age for tobacco purchases to 21. Maybe I'm just crazy.
well, and if we're talking about preventing people from picking up a harmful activity like smoking, then rather than wagging your finger at folks and saying you're not tall enough to ride this ride, maybe a more appropriate approach is to offer better alternatives, because tobacco historically historically meaning longer than the United States, falls in that category of things that people are going to try and like, or try and not like,
Right.
no matter what's in front of you. I had my first cigarette when I was 13 years old.
Oh, yeah. I think that's a part. Experimenting, generally speaking, is a part of being a teenager.
And here's the thing. There are many countries all over the world that, doesn't matter how old you are, if you walk in and ask for a glass of wine with dinner, you get a glass of wine with dinner. And we know how stupid teenagers are. And they like to think they are more grown up than they are. And when you take something and say, you're not grown up enough to have this, they are going to do whatever it is their sneaky little asses have to do to get that, because they know they are grown up enough to do it.
It's the forbidden fruit factor. It absolutely makes things more popular than they should be. And there's actually more than one epidemiologist I've seen say that tobacco control has actually done more to prolong smoking worldwide than it has to curb it because of the forbidden fruit factor. Because people are like, screw you, I'll make my own decisions. Look how well the actual war on drugs has worked out. Look at how many billions we actually spend on it. Look how strong the gangs are in Mexico. Look how much money is made in this market globally. Contrast that with places like Oregon and Colorado, places that have decriminalized one drug or another and taxed it. Oregon just recently did that, and I don't know how that's going, but I know Colorado did it, and they made so much money. Everybody got their property taxes back in the state, plus $1,000. Okay, people are going to do what they want to do, whether it's legal or illegal. And the more laws you make, the less people have respect for those laws. But I mean, to circle around to what I was saying, you have always said we are victims of the drug war. I believe you're absolutely right. And I say that because I think a lot of these things, even smoking, is dangerous to a certain small degree to people who are bystanders. But even that degree is so ridiculously small, it can't really be quantified. It's like 1 or 0.1 or less than 1, something that epidemiologists used to consider null. Okay. And they did notice that people who smoked did get more rates of cancer or this or that, but that could also be, confounded with lifestyle choices, etc. And that isn't all factored in. But by lying by omission about how something is extremely dangerous, you tend to glamorize it and make it something that people want to attain because they want to be cool, instead of it just being a thing that people choose to do or to not do. I don't think that's really the best way to conduct business. I don't know. I don't know what I was really thinking, but I don't know what they're thinking. They've got so many more pressing problems.
Well,
Don't
and
you
this
think?
something like this, I'm sure, seems like a slam dunk. By the way, the entire list of sponsors on this bill are all Democrat. So it's, I mean, that's their
That's how they
agenda.
roll.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say a lot of glowing words for either party, but yeah, in general, it's less about, I think, allowing people to make decisions and more about telling them how to behave, which, the drug war is an excellent example of how well that works. So, yeah.
I think the sooner people wake up to the fact that this is another casualty of the drug war, vaping, that we will be another casualty of the drug war unless we stand up and speak out against it, like the people at Normal did for medical cannabis use. They will bury us unless we do something, unless we speak up, unless we care. And maybe that's a side effect of there being so many laws, but I don't know. I'd rather not make it harder for the person behind me. If sending a letter to my senator or congressman or going to see my Congress critter, who's not my favorite human being, and speaking out against it can change it, I would want to do that first. You know what I mean? I mean, and people can contact their Democratic or Republican Congress critters, senators, to talk about their displeasure on this sort of issue.
I think there's actually a remarkable amount of content in the letter that we're asking people to send in support of HR 2058.
Yeah.
So, and that's, I hope that when, we write these letters, that the folks that are sending them are actually taking the time to read them themselves before they send this along, and digest some of the messages that we're sending, and arm yourself. One of the things that I did, I can't remember exactly which action it was, but I sent one of the pre-written letters to to my congressman here in New Jersey, and I got a kind of a canned response back.
Right.
I've watched all. It's actually kind of interesting. In the very beginning, the canned responses were more of like, "I got your message. I care, and check out my website." And now they've gone into the stock. I've received your message, and I care very much about what my constituents say. And then it kind of gives this like standard breakdown of what the FDA deeming regulations are, and what an electronic, even they go into what an electronic cigarette is, a battery powered device that vaporizes liquid nicotine, and blah blah blah. So they've evolved, and it's now becoming a part of the consciousness of lawmakers, and so it's actually, I've said this I think a couple times before, but when you get that canned response back, it's a good opportunity to respond again and say, it didn't seem like you got the whole picture on this. I wanted to fill you in on some of the details, and you always take that opportunity to dispute some of the things. Bills typically have a preamble, or in this case, I'm looking at SB2100. It's under Section 2 findings. So even some of these numbers here, that tobacco use has caused 20,800,000 premature deaths in the United States. I'm pretty sure that we could debate that number, and specifically we could debate those deaths being attributed directly to tobacco.
Yep.
So that number in of itself is very inflated and wholly inaccurate, I'm sure. And of course, now that with the recent Surgeon General's report, there are I don't know if it's a long list, but there's a new list of diseases that are caused by smoking, essentially, and allegedly. And so now that as we have watched the death toll from smoking kind of go down a little bit, it creeps back up a little bit more, because now all these other diseases are associated with smoking, which it's just, that's more like panic, fire in the theater kind of stuff. So
it's kind of like the boy crying wolf. There was a really interesting article, and I don't know if I ever talked about this, about 5 years ago. This woman who's a nurse, and she was studying to become an epidemiologist. She worked in a flu ward, and she was trying to get a count on the number of deaths that there actually were. And she went through and she found out how the Canadian government totaled up the amounts for deaths from the flu. Basically, if you had any sort of upper respiratory infection the season that the flu went around and had gone to see a doctor for it, you were counted in the statistics as a flu death, because of how SAMMEC, which is also the computer program that decides, how many people die from smoking, decided that's what it was going to include. When they found the actual deaths were something like less than 200 for all of Canada. And they had massively inflated numbers because of the computer and the parameters that the health department had decided to put into the system. So they use numbers and big sounding words to scare all of us. They've done that for a really long time. There's good epidemiology, the stuff I see Carl and Brad Rodew and Clive Bates and so many of the others do. And then there's this like voodoo stuff that I see Stanton, Glantz, and other people engaging in. And it's really hard to educate people on the fact that the numbers that they have in their hands might not be the truth. And I don't know how you educate people about that.
It's difficult, and once you start putting enough zeros behind certain numbers, it's all just sort of mush. And that's like a human problem. There's no that's just these are huge problems that I think very few people in the world can actually wrap their heads around. So trying to disseminate that information without losing some of the significance or some very, very important details, I think is very difficult. So I have some empathy there with some of the science folks struggling with that. Just because I'm the one on the other end trying to understand this stuff, and it's difficult for me. So I can't imagine how difficult it is for them.
Well, I think it's got to be harder for them trying to tease out the good science from the clump of weeds, basically, of lies surrounding the actual good scientific fact. That's really hard to do. And there's so very few people who can actually do it, with a detached framework. And I think that makes those people extremely rare, and it really is sad that those kind of people aren't the kind of people who could get funding from the government to study how these things work, because they really should be the ones studying it, not the people they're giving grants to. Okay, I'm sorry, I totally went off course.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
I showed up with not a lot to talk about, yet here we are 20 minutes later.
Hey,
That's
it's
fine.
impressive.
Yeah.
We love you, Julie.
We do, actually. Wait till she gets this one.
I do want to mention, to completely change gears, actually not entirely.
Okay.
We were talking about, now I forget what we were talking about that made me think of this, but I was going to bring it up anyway, and I had a really nice segue and I totally blew it. But speaking of, I guess you mentioned Stanton Glantz. There is on our blog, we tweeted it out, I think, shortly after we posted it, but CASAA submitted a second comment to the advance notice of proposed rulemaking, warnings, and child-resistant packaging for liquid nicotine-containing e-liquids, and other tobacco products. I'm not going to read the docket number. I've already gone too far with the title. But this is a comprehensive takedown. Would that be appropriate?
I think it's a reschooling of Stanton Glantz's.
So T-Cores / something. I think we might have it in here. Yes, the University of California, San Francisco Tobacco Center of Regulatory Science, T-Cores, and the California Poison Control System, CPCS, submitted a comment, a long, rambling comment in response to the FDA's call for comments. And they kind of went totally extreme, exactly what you would think they would say, which is that all of these dire warnings should be on bottles of e-liquid. And I'm not going to sit here and try to summarize this, but suffice to say, it is worth reading if you have not read it already. I had to find the link because our website is, I don't want to bring this up ever again, but our website is a little difficult to navigate. So I've tried to make this accessible. If you search through the FDA stuff that we have posted up, you can find it. But probably an easier way to do it is just look at our tweets for the past week, which are not that many. We don't tweet a lot. So that's two things about CASAA. We're not going to fill up your Twitter news feed with a bunch of stuff, and we don't send spam. So we're pretty good neighbors. But it is hard to find things when you need to access some of the interesting stuff that we do. Total side note there. But check it out. One of our advisors, Brian Carter, and Carl Phillips worked pretty hard on this, and I think knocked it out of the park in in offering UCSF some re-education, maybe, and hopefully this provides a good counterweight and some very very much needed perspective to the FDA.
Yeah.
So that comment and our comment are both up on our blog, and I recommend everybody take a look at that, because you know, this course takes us down into, you know, this butts right up against, you know, acceptable marketing type stuff, which is going to be a pretty critical conversation going forward.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you had seen or not, but I know I had seen, I'm pretty sure you had seen, where they're starting to study the vape conventions now. And
oh yeah,
they've been studying our Twitter feeds and our Facebook groups, and they started talking about doing that about 2 years ago, and that's when the group that I inherited from my friend who passed away, I took and made the group private. There's like 20 people who might see the posts in there, but I'll be damned if they're going to include anything I put in there.
I honestly, I
damaging
think
us.
I think they should study it. I would like to see the crap that they churn out and give some knowledgeable people an opportunity to do what Brian and Carl did to UCSF's comment.
We should start inviting them to everyone. I really do. I think every convention out there should start inviting these people. Here, would you like to?
Are you crazy?
I'm not crazy. I think.
Oh no!
Do you really want Glantz? Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes, definitely.
Glantz coming in with his his freaking space suit with the independent airline going in.
Yep.
Yeah.
We would.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Yeah, because you could stand on the airline.
I think it would also cause people to think a little harder about what we're up against. I had actually I was at a show in Texas, and one of the guys that was he was an employee of the convention center, and he was wearing a dust mask. And I asked him, I said, do they make you wear that, or is that your decision? And he said, it's the smell. It makes me feel queasy. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. You know, I mean, he's not walking around doing the kind of like, I'm fake coughing because I think it's smoke. He was genuinely uncomfortable around all of that vapor. And so, you know, but he's just sort of a independent person. Now, to throw a scientist into that mix who's walking around maybe with a suit and tie and a dust mask on, taking notes, I think people might perk up a bit and say, wow, like, yeah, they're paying attention to us. We're under the microscope here. It's time to reevaluate a few things.
Well, there's already been 4 or 5 studies about how we act on social media. And they're using that and submitting it to the FDA. By the way, and like you said, talking about marketing, because, you know, a lot of our vendors talk to us on social media.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of it's.
I would love for them to walk up to the door, Jan, and find out that they have to have a photo ID that proves they're over 18 years old to get in the door.
Yeah. Yeah, they should see how these events are actually being run responsibly.
Yeah, and I understand the whole smell thing, and I say that because when my husband took me to VaporCon 1, he couldn't be in the event room. All of the flavoring, the smells were
it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot because people are able to vape, and there's hundreds, sometimes thousands of people gathered in a space that might have seemed quite spacious at the time, but then as more people go to meet and see people like them, there's less and less room. Yeah. It is overwhelming. It can be overwhelming for people who vape. I mean, I remember I was like, I have to go outside. Now, I vape I'm around smokers all the time too. I could care less. That doesn't bother me, right? But I had to go outside. The last 2 vape events I went to, it was very, very foggy. But
Yeah.
you know,
I'm headed down to VaporCon this weekend. Actually, there's going
Yay!
to
I
be
get to see
several.
you, Alex.
Yep. So yeah, myself and Ron Ward and Elaine Keller and I believe Brian Carter is coming out. So we'll have a good group of us down there. But last year, you were there last year, weren't you, Jeannie?
Yes, but I overslept again and missed a meeting.
Wow, you overslept pretty hard then. Oh, the meeting, the member meeting. Yeah. I thought you said you missed the entire event. Sorry.
No.
That would be weird.
Stay up to the hours of the morning talking to Kazi and Ron Ward. It probably wouldn't happen.
Yeah. But I mean, last year it was that's the smallest space out of any of these events that I've gone to, and it got to a point last year where you couldn't see across the room, and for me, my experience wasn't so much, I typically don't have a problem with the smell, and there's no like breathing issues that come up, or my eyes don't start to burn or anything weird like that. But just I think visually existing in that fog for hours, it kind of does something to my mood, and I want to see things in a little bit higher definition at some point. So it gets a little weird. Maybe somebody should study that. I don't know.
I think it just feels surreal after a while. It's like not that I would know. I've never been to one, but it kind of reminds me of some of the heavy metal stage shows they had in the early 80s with a ton of, fake fog.
Yeah.
I find if you're actually close to fog machines at those events, that can be kind of irritating. So I think it's just like that. I don't think it's anything else. I think it's just kind of the concentration.
Yeah.
Can be kind of irritating. So yeah, I don't know. I still don't want Glantz at any vape event. I'm so sorry to say.
I think they should. I think they need to cowboy up and come down and talk to real people and see what goes on. I can't tell you how impressed I was to see I believe this is in New Jersey, and it was from like 2 towns over or something. The mayor and the city councilor and the chief of police and like the city lawyer all showed up at a vapor shop and were asking questions to the guy behind the counter who actually was informed and knew quite a bit. And it was one of those situations where I showed up and was able to kind of stand back and watch it happen, because there was a good dialogue going on, and
right.
Everybody left. There were handshakes and smiles, and that impresses me. Doing research at arm's length, unless you're studying nuclear material, it's just not that. I don't see how that is actually beneficial. There's no context there. You're just taking statements off of social media, or in the case of the person that did the research on conventions, she was just looking at, I think Carl actually explained it, she's just looking at splash pages for conventions. I mean, what are you going to learn from that?
But it's not them. It's not about them learning anything. It's about them finding a way to keep their funding, I think. And I agree, if you want actual scientific research, then the scientists should come down and interact with the vapors. Well, maybe not even interact, even like stand back and take measurements and observe. But I don't mean interact like that, but I mean, how well is Mr. Glantz, I can't call him professor or anything, but how well is Mr. Glantz going to be received by the vaping community if he comes to a vape event? You know what I mean?
Well, I guarantee you probably 75% of them, and I did just pull that number out of thin air, 75% of them don't know who he is.
That's a scary statistic there, Alex.
Yeah, I mean,
off the cuff epidemiology there.
Yeah, exactly. That's not based on anything. It's just I mean, but if I want to run the numbers, I mean, let's think about it. We got 70,000 CASAA members out of 3 million dedicated users in the United
Right.
States. So what's the percentage on that? Let's just assume that everybody that hasn't heard of CASAA doesn't really know what kind of challenges we're facing, and they aren't, signed up to get our emails.
Right.
I would say that, yes, there are probably millions of people that absolutely adore these products and can attribute some sort of life-saving event to them, that just don't quite grasp the forces against us.
Yeah.
And I hate to refer to Stanton Glantz as a force.
No,
But-
he's not really. He's kind of like I don't know. Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I didn't really just say that. Yeah. I think he's serious about what he's doing. I think he's not happy about where the funds for his chosen career be drying up. And I think he's at the age where it's not a good time to look for a new career. So I think he's highly motivated. I don't think that makes him a serious force. I just think that makes him dangerous. I think that makes a lot of them very dangerous, and I think we underestimate them.
Yeah, the other side of this coin is I liken it to what's the word? How when you watch those courtroom shows and the lawyer says something that he knows is going to get an objection, but
Right.
he says it anyway because it sticks in the mind of the jury.
Yeah.
Like you can strike it from the official record. The judge can instruct those jurors to not consider that part of the testimony. But you know what? It's out there. It was said. So
Right.
I kind of think that a lot of tobacco control's tactics involve saying things that they, in fact, know that are not. They can't really back it up with any good science, but it's out there in the information stream. And really, I'm sure that there is some study that needs to be done on this. But those lies end up in state and federal code, just like we were talking about earlier, and that's the really dangerous stuff there when the lie becomes fact by repetition.
Yeah, but I mean you want to go back to Goebbels and Hitler and all that. They were masters of propaganda, and they knew that worked. You repeat a lie often enough, it sticks in the mind of people and becomes truth.
Yeah.
And you're right, a lot of the laws, a lot of the things occurring in legislation are happening because our opponents feel like it's okay to tell a bold-faced lie to achieve their ends. I think most of us don't feel that way. Tobacco control is very good with one thing. They've studied language. They use it much more effectively than we do, which is a shame. Because they've studied positive and negative verbiage, clean air legislation. They're always saying things like that because it creates a positive image in people's minds. And I think we could actually learn a lot by turning it around and not letting them study us, but I think we should be studying them. Because unfortunately they're effective, and unfortunately they win.
Yeah.
So
I think I briefly touched on that, and I'm not sure. I know that in some side conversations, I don't know how far this has come along, but I think a good example of that would be taking a very detailed look at state and local legislation and seeing just how much of this garbage ends up in the preambles to these bills. And I don't know. I think that's a very time-consuming and possibly very expensive type of thing to do. You're not likely to get an NIH grant for that. but yeah, that's definitely something that.
Well, that might be, you know what? That might just be an interesting thing to just collect all
Yeah.
the legislation you can find and look and find the commonalities and then cross-reference the searches. Any good librarian could help somebody who is motivated do it and track down where they came from, because that would be an interesting tree to make. You know, this is where this came from, this is where this came from, this is where this came from. Yeah, I think it would be very interesting to look at it. I mean, I don't think I have the time to do it, but I do think it's an interesting idea. It's a really good idea, Alex, actually.
I can't claim credit for it, so but for all of those wondering what you can do, if you're not doing anything this weekend, you can come through state laws and pick out the tobacco lies.
Which always sounds like fun, doesn't it?
Yeah, everybody loves spreadsheets.
No. That's why do you think I said tree? Make a dialogue tree. Trees are much easier, less formatting.
Everybody
Much
loves
less
trees.
formatting. I love trees. Okay, I guess we've run the gamut on this, huh?
Yeah, it's a good thing Julie isn't coming to Richmond, because she might murder at least me. So,
Yeah, well.
should.
Well, yeah, that's
I
true.
just like it on public record that it was not my fault, Julie.
That's true.
No, that was me this time. I'm sorry.
And I didn't swear.
No, she didn't. It was just last week.
Last week was bad. I'm still sorry for that.
That's just, it's perfectly fine. Don't worry about it. It's frustrating for all of us. Okay, so I guess that's it for this week. Thank you, Alex, for everything you do, and thanks for a really interesting conversation.
Likewise.
Thanks. And we will see you again next week.
Yep.
Good night.
Good night.